It's the fastest car on the grid, pole position at the Great American Race. 4 days later, that same car is sitting in a back room in Concord, North Carolina, getting taken apart, bolt by bolt, by the people who built the rules it's supposed to follow. They're looking at one part. A part every single car on that grid is supposed to have. Identical, untouched, no exceptions. This one wasn't identical. So what happens when the part that's not supposed to change, changes? By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how one of the biggest teams in NASCAR got caught with an altered part on its way to a top finish at the season's biggest race, and how, 2 weeks later, that same team walked away with the entire penalty erased. You'll see the exact rule they were accused of breaking, the explanation that got them cleared, and the question that explanation never actually answered. And this isn't just a story about something that happened in the past. There's a version of this same tension playing out right now, in a North Carolina courtroom, involving the same organization, and almost nobody outside the garage is talking about it. So let's start where it started, with a part that's supposed to be exactly the same on every single car in the field, and one car where it wasn't. To understand why one elongated hole turned into a six-figure problem, you have to understand what NASCAR's next-gen car was actually designed to do. Before this car, teams built many of their own parts in-house, to their own specs. The next-gen era ended that on purpose. Now every team gets the same spoiler base, the same brake components, the same suspension parts, all sourced from a single approved supplier. Not similar parts, identical parts. No in-house modification allowed for any team under any circumstance. Picture a one-make series stacked on top of stock car racing. Differences are supposed to come from setup, strategy, and driving, never from a part quietly machined to perform better than the identical one parked next to it. That's exactly why NASCAR built a three-tier penalty structure specifically around this idea. L1 covers minor infractions. L2 covers real consequential violations. L3, the harshest tier written into the entire rulebook, is reserved specifically for tampering with or counterfeiting these single-source parts. If a team can alter a part that's supposed to be identical across the whole field, the entire foundation the next-gen car was built on stops meaning anything. So when NASCAR says a spoiler base was modified, that's not a paperwork technicality buried in a manual. That's the rulebook's entire reason for existing, sitting on the line. Chase Briscoe's first season driving for Joe Gibbs Racing started about as well as a season possibly could. He'd spent the previous 4 years at Stewart-Haas Racing before it shut down, and joining JGR's number 19 car was supposed to be a fresh start with one of the sport's most decorated teams. It looked like exactly that, right out of the gate. Briscoe won the pole for the Daytona 500, becoming the first Toyota driver in the race's history to do it, and backed that up with a fourth-place finish in the race itself. A result that strong, at that race, gets a car pulled for inspection as a matter of routine. But this time, NASCAR went further than the standard trackside checks. They took the number 19 car all the way to their research and development center in Concord, North Carolina, the facility NASCAR reserves for cases that need a deeper, more technical look than what a garage inspection can provide. What they found there was specific, not speculative. The holes used to mount the spoiler base to the rear deck weren't the size they were supposed to be coming out of the box. They were elongated, measurably stretched beyond the exact spec every other car on the grid was built to. NASCAR cited two precise sections of the rulebook in the penalty notice. Section 14.1, covering overall vehicle assembly, and Section 14.5.8, covering the spoiler specifically. Both point to the same underlying issue, unauthorized modification of a part that no team, under any circumstance, is allowed to touch. This wasn't a vague suspicion or a borderline call. It was a measured, documented difference between what the part was built to look like and what it actually looked like, bolted onto that one car. NASCAR didn't treat this gently. The penalty came down at level 2, the second harshest tier in their entire system, just 3 days after Briscoe's fourth-place finish, and it hit every layer of the team at once. Chase Briscoe lost 100 driver points and 10 playoff points. Joe Gibbs Racing, as the car's owner, lost the identical amount on the owner side, 100 points, 10 playoff points. The team was fined $100,000 outright, and crew chief James Small, the man running the pit box every single race weekend, was suspended for 4 races. To put the points loss in real terms, Briscoe had just finished 4th at the season's opening race, off a pole-winning lap of over 182 miles an hour. After the penalty landed, he was sitting at negative 28 points in the championship standings, worse than dead last in a field of dozens of cars. NASCAR's language in the penalty notice left no room for a middle ground. This wasn't written as a borderline call or a gray area judgment. It was written as a clear, confirmed violation involving a single-source part, full stop, with the full weight of the rulebook standing behind every word of it. Joe Gibbs Racing's response wasn't denial, it was an explanation. According to the team, the holes around the spoiler base mounting points didn't get larger because anyone deliberately modified them. They got larger during the completely normal process of bolting the part onto the car. The bolts attaching the spoiler base to the deck lid, the team said, caused wear on the pre-drilled holes due to how that specific part physically interacted with the deck lid during assembly. In plain terms, their argument was, this is simply what can happen when you physically install this exact piece, and on this particular car, it happened to show up more than it usually does. The tone from the team throughout this process was cooperative, not combative. No public accusations against NASCAR's inspectors. No claim that the inspection process itself was unfair or rigged. Not long after, the team announced it would appeal, and James Small stayed atop the number 19 pit box in the meantime, rather than starting his suspension right away. Then they took that technical argument straight to the National Motorsports Appeals Panel. 2 weeks after the penalty was first announced, the National Motorsports Appeals Panel heard the case in full. The three-person panel was Dixon Johnston, a motorsports marketing executive, Hunter Nickel, a former Speed Channel president, and Kathy Rice, a former short-track general manager. In a result that surprised close followers of these appeals, the panel didn't reduce the penalty or split the difference. They erased it completely, every part of it. Their official written explanation matched Joe Gibbs Racing's defense almost word for word. The panel believed the elongation of the holes on the number 19 car's spoiler base was caused by the process of attaching that specific spoiler base to the rear deck, not by modification of the single-source part. Every point came back. The full $100,000 fine, gone. James Small's 4-race suspension, lifted before a single race of it had even started. The point swing this caused was enormous. Briscoe went from -28, dead last in the entire field, up to a tie for 14th in the championship standings, with 72 points restored to him overnight. He called it the biggest points day of his career, thanking NASCAR for hearing the evidence and the people inside Joe Gibbs Racing who built the case that got him there. By every official measure, it was a clean, complete win for the team. But here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. The entire premise of the next-gen car is that this exact spoiler base is identical across every team in the field. Same supplier, same dimensions, same bolts, same installation process, every single time. If assemblyware explains why this car's holes stretched beyond spec, the obvious question is, why didn't it happen to anyone else's identical car that same weekend? Worth noting, a second car was also pulled for that same deeper inspection at Concord that weekend, and there's no public record of what, if anything, was found on it. No other team's spoiler base was reported to have hit that same threshold that season. No technical breakdown of why this car's holes wore differently than every other car's was ever made public. The appeals panel delivered their conclusion in 2 sentences. They didn't publish the underlying engineering analysis behind it, and after that ruling came down, no competing crew chief, no rival team, and no NASCAR official went on record publicly challenging that explanation. Not one. To be clear, that's not proof of a cover-up. There's no evidence anyone hid anything from anyone. But it is a documented, observable fact. The explanation that cleared one of the sport's biggest, most successful organizations was accepted, applied, and never independently retested in public again. In a garage where every single team is one inspection away from facing the exact same kind of penalty, almost nobody wants to be the one throwing the first stone. And this isn't the first time Joe Gibbs Racing's name has shown up next to the words altered part. In 2008, NASCAR's own dynamometer testing on 2 Joe Gibbs Racing Nationwide Series cars found something nobody on the inspection crew was expecting. 1/4-inch thick magnets attached directly to the throttle pedals, deliberately limiting exactly how far the accelerator could open. Joe Gibbs himself accepted full responsibility and promised an internal investigation into how it happened and who was involved. 7 crew members were suspended indefinitely. Both drivers and the team itself were docked 150 points apiece. In 2022, at Pocono, Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch crossed the finish line first and second, a dream result, the kind of 1-2 finish teams build entire seasons around. Then post-race inspection found illegal modifications to the front fascias on both cars. Both drivers were disqualified on the spot, the win and the result wiped completely from the record books, as if the race had never happened for either of them. And in 2024, an engine that had just won a race at Bristol and was supposed to be retired after that win somehow ended up back in service at Darlington instead, in direct violation of the rules governing engine usage. Toyota Racing Development's own president, David Wilson, called it, in his exact words, a grievous mistake, and publicly apologized to Denny Hamlin, to Joe Gibbs, and to the entire organization. Crew chief Chris Gabehart explained that teams sometimes reuse engines for process-saving reasons, and this time, instead of going to NASCAR for inspection, it went back home to its home. 3 different decades, 3 completely different parts of the car, the exact same underlying pattern. Something that wasn't supposed to happen to this car happened to this car. And the most recent chapter in this isn't history. It's happening right now. In February of 2026, Joe Gibbs Racing filed a lawsuit against its own former competition director, Chris Gabehart, the same crew chief from the Darlington engine story, alleging he took confidential setup files, payroll records, and pit data with the intention of handing them over to Spire Motorsports, where he'd just accepted a new leadership role. The team is seeking at least $8 million in damages. Weeks later, the lawsuit expanded to add Spire Motorsports itself as a co-defendant, along with a request for a restraining order to block Gabehart from working in a comparable competitive role during his non-compete period. Former driver Brian Keselowski argued publicly that the next-gen car's push toward parity has made setups far easier to copy from team to team, and that lawsuits like this one will likely become the norm rather than the exception. As of now, the case is headed to trial, scheduled for January, still working through a North Carolina federal court with nothing resolved. It points to something bigger than one lawsuit. In the next-gen era, where every car on the grid is built from the exact same approved parts, the thing worth protecting and the thing worth taking isn't a magnet hidden on a throttle pedal anymore. It's the setup data and the institutional knowledge that tell one team how to use those identical parts better than the team parked right next to them in the garage. The band technology changed shape entirely. The instinct to guard it, or to take it, never did. Is this a story about NASCAR lying? Not exactly, and that's the more uncomfortable answer to sit with. This is a story about a sport built entirely on the idea that certain parts are identical across every single car on the grid, repeatedly running into cases where one team's supposedly identical part didn't behave like everyone else's. And every time, the explanation that resolved it relied on something nobody outside a small room of officials could independently verify. The spoiler case was never proven, with hard evidence, to be a deliberate violation. It also was never proven to be nothing at all. What's actually true here is simpler than a conspiracy, and harder to sit with. A sport this competitive runs on trust, in explanations that almost never get tested a second time. Maybe the more honest title for a story like this one isn't NASCAR lied, it's NASCAR explained, and almost nobody outside that room ever checked the math. That back room in Concord, where this entire story started, nobody outside it ever really found out exactly what happened in there. And maybe that's the actual point. So here's the real question worth sitting with. Do you buy the assemblyware explanation, or do you think Joe Gibbs Racing's engineers simply built the best possible defense a smart team could put together under deadline? Drop your take in the comments, because I want to know where you land, and whether this is the last time we'll be talking about a Joe Gibbs racing car and an altered part in the same sentence. And if you want more deep dives into the stories NASCAR's Garage doesn't talk about, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.